The impossible odds. The Zorathian fleet hung in orbit like a shimmering storm, their ships sleek and menacing. Hundreds of vessels formed a wall of destruction, their weapons glowing with unearthly power. Earth's defenses were crumbling, and everyone on the ground knew it. Humanity had fought hard, but against the Zorathians' advanced technology, they were barely holding on. In the command center of the Earth space defense, chaos reigned. Alarms blared, officers shouted, and holographic displays showed the grim situation. General Marcus Hill, a grizzled veteran, slammed his fist on the table. "We're out of options," he growled. "If they fire that planet killer, we're finished." All eyes turned to Captain Adrian Cole, standing calmly at the edge of the room. He was younger than most expected for someone in his position, with sharp features and a piercing gaze. Adrian had a reputation for thinking outside the box, a trait that often got him in trouble. But now, it was the only thing keeping hope alive. "Not yet, General," Adrian said, his voice steady. "We still have one card to play." General Hill frowned. "That old rust bucket. The Iron Resolve hasn't been battle-ready in years. You're sending those men to their deaths." Adrian stepped closer to the holographic display, pointing to the Zorathian fleet's formation. "Their shields are interconnected, like a web. If we disrupt the frequency here," he tapped a spot near the center, "the entire grid will collapse. They won't see it coming." A young officer hesitated. "But sir, how do we even get close enough to do that?" Adrian allowed himself a small smile. "We use the Iron Resolve. Its systems are outdated, yes, but that's exactly why it'll work. Their sensors won't recognize it as a threat. We'll slip right under their noses." The room fell silent. The plan was insane, reckless even, but it was the only plan they had. General Hill sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. "Fine," he muttered. "But if this fails, the blood of those men is on your hands." Adrian didn't flinch. He knew the stakes. "It won't fail," he said firmly. Hours later, the Iron Resolve floated in the black void of space, its hull scarred from battles long past. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly to bring the ship to life. Sparks flew from welding torches, and engineers barked orders as they repaired ancient systems. The ship was a relic, a museum piece compared to the Zorathian fleet, but it was all they had. Adrian stood on the bridge, watching the activity below. Beside him was Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, his trusted second-in-command. She crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "You're really betting everything on this old tin can?" she asked. Adrian glanced at her, a hint of a smile on his lips. "Got a better idea?" Sarah sighed. "No, but I hope you're right, Captain, because if you're wrong..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what failure meant. As the Iron Resolve drifted closer to the Zorathian fleet, tension gripped the crew. The Zorathian ships were monstrous up close, their weapons bristling with deadly energy. Adrian could feel the fear in the air, but he refused to let it show. "Status report," he ordered. "All systems are green." Sarah replied, "But if we take even one direct hit, we're done for." Adrian nodded. "We won't take a hit. They don't even know we're here." The Iron Resolve crept forward, its engines running at minimal power to avoid detection. Adrian's heart pounded as they entered the range of the Zorathian sensors. Any moment now, they could be spotted. Suddenly, the comms crackled. A voice filled the bridge, cold and mocking. It was the Zorathian commander. "Humans," he sneered. "Do you really think you can hide from us? Your desperation is pathetic." The crew froze. They had been discovered. Evasive maneuvers. Adrian barked. The ship lurched as it dodged incoming fire. Explosions lit up the darkness, the Iron Resolve weaving through a storm of plasma bolts. The crew worked frantically, shouting over the roar of alarms. "We can't keep this up," Sarah yelled. "We're sitting ducks out here." Adrian's mind raced. They were so close to the target, but the Zorethians were closing in fast. Then he remembered something, an old trick from Earth's naval history. "Prepare to vent the reactor," he ordered. The crew stared at him in shock. "What? That'll make us glow like a beacon," Sarah protested. "Exactly," Adrian said. "But it'll also blind their sensors. Do it now." Reluctantly, Sarah relayed the command. A moment later, a brilliant burst of energy erupted from the ship, blinding the Zorethians' scanners. The iron resolve disappeared from their radar, slipping through the chaos. As the ship approached the center of the Zorethian fleet, Adrian's hands tightened on the console. "Activate the disruptor," he said. The device hummed to life, sending out a pulse of energy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the Zorethian shields flickered and failed. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Adrian wasn't celebrating yet. The Zorethians were regrouping, and their weapons were now trained directly on the iron resolve. "Brace for impact," Adrian shouted. The first blast rocked the ship, and the lights flickered. The crew clung to their stations as the iron resolve shook violently. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold steady. We're not done yet." The Zorethians were stunned, their formation breaking apart. But Adrian knew this was only the beginning. The real battle had just begun. The unlikely gamble. The bridge of the iron resolve was chaos. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Captain Adrian Cole's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Status report," he barked, gripping the console as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes glanced at her cracked display. "Shields are down to 14%. Engines are running on fumes. We're one hit away from becoming space dust." Adrian's jaw tightened. The iron resolve wasn't meant to fight battles like this, but here they were. An old warhorse going head-to-head with the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. "Divert all remaining power to the disruptor," he ordered. "We're not out of this fight yet." As the crew scrambled to obey, the Zorethian flagship loomed ahead, an ominous silhouette against the blackness of space. Its weapons hummed with lethal energy, charging for another devastating strike. Adrian's plan was risky. No, insane, but it was all they had. In the heart of the Zorethian flagship, Commander Krail paced with confidence. His reptilian scales shimmered under the light of his control room's displays, each screen showing the human vessel flailing under the might of his fleet. "Primitive fools," Krail hissed, his tail flicking in satisfaction. Did they truly believe they could match us, crush them, and end this farce? One of his officers, a smaller Zorethian with nervous eyes, hesitated. "Commander, there is an anomaly." Their ship emitted a disruptive pulse. "Our shield grid is unstable." Krail's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. They lack the intelligence to exploit our defenses." The officer hesitated again. "And yet, the grid is failing. Their interference has destabilized our formation." Krail bared his fangs. "Reinforce the formation. Let them struggle. It changes nothing." But deep down, even Krail couldn't ignore the twinge of doubt growing in his mind. On board the Iron Resolve, Adrian's gamble was paying off. The disruptor had caused chaos among the Zorethians, their once impenetrable shield grid flickering like static on an old TV. But the victory was short-lived. "Captain, the disruptor's overheating," Sarah warned. "If we keep pushing it, it'll blow." Adrian didn't hesitate. "We'll push it until it does. If it takes out their shields, it'll be worth it." Sarah gave him a sharp look. "That's a suicide move." Adrian met her gaze, his voice quiet but firm. "We don't win this fight by playing it safe." As the disruptor hummed louder, the ship groaned under the strain. Adrian felt the tension in the air, the unspoken fear that this might be their last stand. He refused to let it show. Suddenly, a transmission crackled through the comms. A woman's voice, cool and commanding, broke the tension. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Fleet Shadow Division. Captain Cole, You've made quite the mess." Adrian's eyes widened. "Elena, what the hell are you doing out here?" "Saving your reckless ass," Elena replied. "We've been tracking the Zorathians for months. Didn't think I'd find you in the middle of it." Before Adrian could respond, the view screen lit up with a stunning sight. Dozens of human warships shimmered into view, their cloaking devices deactivating. The Shadow Fleet had arrived. The crew erupted into cheers, but Adrian remained focused. "What's your plan, Admiral?" "Simple," Elena said. "We take the fight to them. Keep your disruptor active. It's the only thing keeping their shields down." Adrian smirked. "Glad to see you haven't lost your sense of drama." The Shadow Fleet moved with surgical precision, cutting through the Zorathian formation like a blade. Unlike the lumbering Iron Resolve, these ships were sleek and fast, equipped with the latest human technology. But the Zorathians weren't giving up easily. Their fleet adjusted, adapting to the disruptor's interference. Plasma fire filled the void, creating a deadly light show. Adrian watched the battle unfold, a mix of awe and frustration. "They're regrouping faster than we can hit them," he muttered. "We need a bigger advantage." Sarah frowned. "What are you thinking?" Adrian's eyes flicked to the tactical display. "The flagship. If we take it out, the rest will crumble." Sarah's jaw dropped. "You want us to target that monster? With what?" Adrian grinned, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "With everything." Back on the Zorathian flagship, Krail snarled as the Shadow Fleet tore through his forces. "How are they doing this?" he roared, slamming a clawed fist into the console. The nervous officer trembled. "Their tactics are unpredictable, Commander. They exploit weaknesses faster than we can counter." Krail's tail lashed. "Then eliminate the source. Destroy the disruptor ship." The Zorathians focused their fire on the Iron Resolve, their plasma bolts tearing through space. Adrian's crew worked frantically, trying to keep the ship together. "Captain, we're not going to make it," Sarah shouted as the hull groaned under the strain. "We'll make it," Adrian said, his voice steady. "Prepare all remaining weapons. We're going straight for the flagship." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "You're insane." "Maybe," Adrian replied. "But if we pull this off, they'll never see it coming." The Iron Resolve surged forward, a battered relic charging into the heart of the Zorathian fleet. The Shadow Fleet covered its advance, drawing fire away as Adrian's crew prepared for the final strike. "Target the flagship's main reactor," Adrian ordered. "We hit that, and it's game over." As the Zorathian flagship loomed closer, Adrian took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would decide the battle. "Fire everything," he said. The Iron Resolve unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy blasts, striking the flagship's weakened shields. Explosions rippled across the massive vessel, and for the first time, the Zorathians faltered. "Direct hit," Sarah shouted, their reactors destabilizing. Adrian allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Let's finish this." The Shadow Fleet. The Zorathian flagship reeled from the Iron Resolve's strike, its once impenetrable shields now flickering like a dying flame. Explosions danced across its hull, sending debris spiraling into the void. On board the flagship, Commander Krail's composure cracked. "Status report," Krail demanded, his voice a guttural snarl. An officer, his scales dull with fear, stammered, "Commander, their disruptor is destabilizing our grid. The humans, they're exploiting our vulnerabilities." Krail bared his fangs. "Then crush the disruptor ship. No more excuses." On the Iron Resolve, Captain Adrian Cole gripped the edge of his console, sweat trickling down his temple. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted as the ship shuddered violently. The Zorathians were focusing all their firepower on them now, and the aging vessel was barely holding together. "We're not going to last much longer, Captain," Lieutenant Sarah Hayes shouted over the roar of alarms. "Shields are gone, and the hull's integrity is critical." Adrian's jaw tightened, He glanced at the tactical display, where the Shadow Fleet was engaging the Zorethians in a ferocious battle. Dozens of sleek, black warships darted between the enemy vessels, their advanced cloaking devices making them almost impossible to track. "Hold on," Adrian said. "Elena's got our back." Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Shadow Dagger, her expression sharp and unreadable. Her fleet had arrived just in time to turn the tide, but even with their advanced technology, the Zorethians were proving to be a formidable opponent. "Admiral, the Iron Resolve is taking heavy fire," her tactical officer reported. "They won't survive much longer." Elena's lips tightened into a thin line. "Divert 3 stealth frigates to cover them. That disruptor is the only reason we're still in this fight." The officer hesitated. "Admiral, with respect, that leaves us vulnerable." "Do it," Elena snapped. "If that ship goes down, so do we." 3 sleek frigates decloaked near the Iron Resolve, their sudden appearance drawing the Zorethians' attention. They unleashed a barrage of missiles, forcing the enemy ships to redirect their fire. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Adrian let out a relieved breath. "Looks like she still has a soft spot for me," he muttered. Sarah smirked despite the chaos. "Don't get used to it. She'll probably chew you out when this is over." "Assuming we survive," Adrian said grimly. "What's the status on the disruptor?" "Barely holding," Sarah replied. "Another hit, and it'll overload." "Then let's make sure that doesn't happen," Adrian said. He turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through to Elena." A moment later, Elena's face appeared on the flickering screen. "Nice to see you haven't gotten yourself killed yet, Adrian," she said dryly. "Working on it," Adrian replied. "We've got a shot at taking out their flagship, but I need your fleet to clear us a path." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You want me to risk my entire fleet for one shot? What's the plan?" Adrian's eyes glinted. "We ram them." For a moment, Elena stared at him in disbelief. Then, to Adrian's surprise, she smiled. "You haven't changed a bit. Fine. But if this doesn't work, I'm putting it on your tombstone." The Shadow Fleet shifted tactics, their warships forming a protective corridor around the Iron Resolve. The Zorethians, caught off guard by the sudden maneuver, struggled to adapt. Their once cohesive formation began to fray. Inside the flagship, Krail's frustration boiled over. What are they doing? Why are they protecting that wreck of a ship? The nervous officer hesitated. "Commander, I believe they're targeting us." Krail snarled. "Let them come. We'll crush them before they get close." On the Iron Resolve, the crew prepared for the final push. The ship groaned under its own weight, every system on the verge of failure. Adrian stood tall on the bridge, his voice steady despite the odds. "All hands, this is the captain," he said over the intercom. "We're about to do something insane, but if we pull it off, we end this war. Stay sharp, stay strong, and trust in each other. Humanity's counting on us." The crew responded with a resounding cheer, their fear replaced by determination. "Helm," Adrian said, turning to the pilot. "Take us straight at the flagship." The Iron Resolve surged forward, a battered relic charging into the heart of the enemy fleet. Zorethian ships fired relentlessly, but the Shadow Fleet held the line, absorbing the brunt of the attack. As they closed the distance, the Zorethian flagship loomed larger than ever, its weapons glowing with deadly energy. Adrian's heart pounded as he gave the final order. "Activate the disruptor." Full power. The ship shook violently as the disruptor unleashed a massive pulse of energy. The Zorethian fleet's shields flickered and died, leaving them vulnerable. The flagship shuddered as its systems overloaded, sparks flying from its hull. But the Iron Resolve wasn't finished. "Target their reactor," Adrian ordered. "Let's end this." The Iron Resolve's final volley of missiles struck the flagship's reactor, triggering a massive explosion. The Zorethian flagship erupted in a fiery blaze, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. The remaining Zorethian ships faltered, their formation collapsing without their leader. Adrian gripped the console as the shockwave rocked the iron resolve. The ship groaned, its systems failing one by one. But the flagship was gone, and the battle was turning in humanity's favor. "Captain," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe. "We did it." Adrian allowed himself a small smile. "Not yet. The war's not over, but it's a damn good start." Betrayal in the ranks. The aftermath of the Zorathian flagship's destruction was both exhilarating and grim. The battlefield was littered with debris, some of it glowing faintly from the energy of the disrupted shields. The remaining Zorathian ships were retreating in disarray, their once dominant fleet reduced to scattered survivors. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Captain Adrian Cole leaned against the edge of his console, exhaustion etched across his face. The ship was barely holding together, but the crew's morale soared after the destruction of the flagship. "Damage report," Adrian said, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes scanned her console, her brow furrowing. "Hull integrity is at 9%. Engines are critical, and the disruptor is completely fried. We're dead in the water, Captain." Adrian nodded. "Send a signal to Admiral Vasquez. Tell her we need immediate extraction." Sarah hesitated. "Captain, there's something else." Adrian turned to her, frowning. "What is it?" Before she could answer, the lights on the bridge flickered, and an alert blared. A deep voice echoed through the ship's intercom, distorted and mechanical. "Attention, crew of the Iron Resolve. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, but this battle ends here." Adrian's blood ran cold. "Who the hell is that?" Sarah's hands flew over the controls. The signals coming from inside the ship, deep within the Iron Resolve. In the engineering bay, chaos erupted. The ship's reactor, already unstable, was being deliberately overloaded. Engineers shouted in confusion as a lone figure moved among them, planting devices that pulsed with an eerie red glow. The saboteur, a human dressed in a patched uniform, worked quickly, their face obscured by a helmet. They placed the final device on the main reactor and activated a countdown. "This isn't personal," the saboteur murmured. "It's survival." Back on the bridge, Sarah's voice was tight with urgency. "Captain, the reactor's been sabotaged. We're looking at a full meltdown in 5 minutes." Adrian slammed his fist on the console. "Who's behind this?" Sarah pulled up the security feed, and the bridge crew stared in shock. The saboteur's identity was revealed. Ensign Malik, one of their own. "Malik," Adrian said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Why would he?" A second signal interrupted him. Malik's voice, calm and measured, filled the room. "Captain Cole, if you're hearing this, you've already found my work. I had no choice. The Zorathians promised to spare Earth if we surrendered. But your recklessness, have doomed us all." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He thinks he's saving us by blowing up our ship." "Not just the ship," Sarah said grimly. "If the reactor goes, it'll take out the surrounding area, including the Shadow Fleet." Adrian's heart sank. Malik wasn't just sabotaging the Iron Resolve. He was trying to force humanity into surrender by crippling their last hope. In the engineering bay, Malik was cornered by a group of engineers. He pulled a plasma pistol, holding them at bay. "Stay back," he shouted. "You don't understand. This is the only way to save Earth." The engineers froze, unwilling to provoke him. But they didn't have to wait long. Adrian and Sarah arrived moments later, armed and ready. Adrian's eyes locked on Malik. "Malik, put the weapon down," Adrian said, his voice steady but firm. "We can fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Captain," Malik said, his voice trembling. "Do you really think we can win this war? The Zorathians are too powerful. They offered us peace if we surrendered. I'm doing what you want, saving lives." Adrian stepped closer, his weapon lowered. "You think surrender is the answer? Look around you, Malik. They won't stop with Earth. They'll take everything." Malik shook his head. "You don't understand. I've seen what they can do. They showed me. They lied. Adrian interrupted, his voice sharp. That's what they do. They make you believe there's no hope. But there's always hope, Malik. You just have to fight for it. For a moment, it seemed like Malik might listen, but then the countdown timer on the reactor hit 2 minutes, and his resolve hardened. I'm sorry, Malik said. I can't let you stop this. He raised his pistol, but before he could fire, Sarah took the shot. Malik fell to the floor, clutching his side, his weapon clattering away. Adrian rushed to the reactor, examining the devices Malik had planted. Sarah, I need you here now. We've got less than 2 minutes to shut this down. The bridge crew watched anxiously as the timer ticked down. On screen, the Zorathian fleet began to regroup, sensing an opportunity in the humans' moment of weakness. Admiral Vasquez's voice crackled over the comms. Adrian, what's going on over there? We're seeing energy spikes from your reactor. Adrian's voice was steady but tense. We've got it under control. Hold the line. In the engineering bay, Adrian and Sarah worked frantically, their hands flying over the reactor's controls. Sweat dripped from Adrian's brow as he bypassed circuit after circuit, trying to stabilize the system. 30 seconds, Sarah warned. I know. Adrian snapped, his fingers moving faster. Almost there. The reactor hummed dangerously, the red glow of the countdown reaching a blinding intensity. Then, with a final surge of effort, Adrian and Sarah cut the last connection. The reactor powered down, and the timer froze at 3 seconds. A collective sigh of relief swept through the ship. On the bridge, the crew cheered as the reactor stabilized. But Adrian wasn't celebrating. He turned to Sarah, his expression grim. This isn't over, he said. The Zorathians know we're vulnerable. They're going to hit us hard. Sarah nodded. Then we'd better be ready. Adrian's voice hardened. Send a message to Elena. It's time to go on the offensive. Turning the tables. The Iron Resolve was a patchwork of failing systems and exhausted crew, yet it drifted defiantly in the aftermath of the reactor crisis. Its battered hull seemed to dare the Zorathians to attack again. Captain Adrian Cole stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical display. The Zorathians were regrouping, their scattered ships converging into a tighter formation. It was clear they were planning another assault. We buy ourselves time, but not much, Lieutenant Sarah Hayes said, standing beside him. Her voice was steady, but her face betrayed her exhaustion. The Shadow Fleet can't hold the line forever. Adrian nodded, his mind racing. They needed a new plan, something bold, something the Zorathians wouldn't anticipate. Patch me through to Admiral Vasquez, he said. Admiral Elena Vasquez appeared on the flickering view screen, her sharp gaze fixed on Adrian. Cole, you're making a habit of getting yourself into trouble. What's the situation? Adrian didn't waste time. We've stabilized the reactor, but the Zorathians are regrouping. We can't outlast them, but we can outthink them. Elena raised an eyebrow. You have a plan. More of a gamble, Adrian admitted. The Zorathian ships are fast, but their formation depends on centralized command. If we take out their secondary command vessel, it'll disrupt their coordination. Elena frowned. The flagship's already gone. Are you saying there's another? Yes, Adrian said, pointing to a faint signal on the tactical display. That cruiser. It's emitting high-level command protocols. They're using it to reestablish control. If we take it out, their fleet will fall apart. Elena's expression hardened. That cruiser's buried in their formation. Getting to it would be suicide. Adrian smirked. Not if we use the debris field. We'll take the Iron Resolve and undercloak from the Shadow Fleet. Elena hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right. I'll divert the fleet to draw their fire. But if you pull this off, you owe me more than a drink. Deal, Adrian said, cutting the transmission. As the Shadow Fleet began its diversionary assault, the Iron Resolve powered up its remaining systems. The ancient ship groaned in protest as its engines flared to life. The crew worked frantically, knowing this mission could be their last. "We've barely got enough power to run the engines, let alone weapons," Sarah warned. "We won't need weapons if we hit them where it hurts," Adrian replied. "Set course for the cruiser and engage silent running." The Iron Resolve slipped into the debris field, using the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover. The Zorathians, distracted by the Shadow Fleet's aggressive maneuvering, didn't notice the lone ship weaving through the chaos. Inside the Zorathian command cruiser, Commander Krail's replacement, a calculating strategist named Vosric, monitored the battle with cold efficiency. Unlike his predecessor, Vosric preferred precision to brute force. "Human tactics remain primitive," Vosric said, his voice devoid of emotion. "They rely on desperation and chaos, redirect fire to their fleet's weakest points." A subordinate hesitated. "Commander, there's an anomaly in the debris field. One of the human ships." "Impossible," Vosric interrupted. "No human ship could evade our sensors. Focus on the larger threat." But the anomaly persisted, creeping closer. On board the Iron Resolve, the tension was palpable. The bridge was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the ship's systems. Adrian studied the cruiser's position on the tactical display. 10 kilometers and closing, Sarah reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Still no sign they've noticed us." "Good," Adrian said. "Prep the fusion core for overload." Sarah spun toward him, eyes wide. "You're not serious." "We don't have the firepower to take them out conventionally," Adrian said. "But if we overload the fusion core and eject it into their reactor, it'll create a chain reaction." "That's suicide," Sarah said, her voice rising. "We won't have time to escape." Adrian met her gaze, his expression resolute. "We'll make time." The Iron Resolve drifted closer, its engines barely emitting a traceable signal. The Zorathian cruiser loomed ahead, its sleek, angular design glowing faintly with energy. Adrian could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Every second counted. "Ejection systems ready," Sarah reported reluctantly. "Good," Adrian said. "On my mark, release the core." The crew braced themselves as the Iron Resolve slipped into position. Adrian's hands hovered over the controls, his mind racing. This was it. Their one shot. Release. The fusion core detached from the ship, propelled by a small burst of energy toward the Zorathian cruiser's reactor. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the core made contact. A blinding flash erupted as the cruiser's reactor destabilized. The explosion ripped through the ship, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Zorathian formation collapsed instantly, their fleet spiraling into chaos. On the Shadow Dagger, Admiral Vasquez watched the explosion with a mixture of awe and relief. "They did it," she murmured. But her relief was short-lived. "Ma'am," her tactical officer said, "the Iron Resolve is caught in the blast radius. They're not responding." Alina's heart sank. "Get me a recovery team. Now." Inside the Iron Resolve, alarms blared as the ship was rocked by the shockwave. Adrian struggled to maintain his footing as the bridge filled with smoke. "Engines are down," Sarah shouted. "We're dead in the water." Adrian grabbed the comms. "Mayday, mayday. This is the Iron Resolve. We need immediate evac." The transmission cut off as the ship was engulfed in light. Humanity's unbreakable spirit. The explosion that destroyed the Zorathian command cruiser illuminated the battlefield, scattering enemy ships in all directions. The once dominant Zorathian fleet now resembled a chaotic swarm of confused vessels. But amidst the fiery wreckage, a solitary signal struggled to stay active. "This is the Iron Resolve." Adrian's voice crackled faintly through the comms. "Engines are offline. Life support failing. Requesting evacuation." On the Shadow Dagger, Admiral Alina Vasquez clenched her fists. "Get me a recovery team on that ship now," she barked. Her tactical officer shook his head. "Admiral, the debris field is unstable. It's too dangerous to send a shuttle in there." Alina slammed her hand on the console. Then we're wasting time talking about it. I'll go myself if I have to. On board the Iron Resolve, chaos reigned. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of structural damage, and fires raged in several compartments. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes struggled to stabilize the remaining systems, her fingers flying over the controls. Life support is down to 10%, Sarah reported, her voice strained. We've got minutes, maybe less. Adrian Cole staggered to her side, his face smeared with soot. What about communications? Intermittent at best, Sarah replied. We're lucky they heard our mayday. Adrian gritted his teeth, surveying the bridge. His crew was battered but determined, refusing to abandon their posts even as the ship fell apart around them. We're not dying here, Adrian said firmly. Not today. Admiral Vasquez didn't hesitate. She ordered one of her fastest stealth frigates, the Shadow Viper, to break formation and head toward the Iron Resolve. Get in, get them out, and get back. That's an order. The Shadow Viper darted through the debris field, its nimble design allowing it to weave between chunks of twisted metal and shattered ship fragments. Inside, the rescue team prepared for the worst. Stay sharp, the team leader said. The Zorethians might still be lurking in the wreckage. Meanwhile, the Zorethians' remaining fleet was in disarray. Without centralized command, their ships acted independently, retreating or firing blindly at the advancing Shadow Fleet. But one ship, a heavily armed dreadnought, had its sights set on the Iron Resolve. On board the Zorethian dreadnought, Commander Vosrick sneered as he observed the struggling human vessel. They think they've won, he hissed. We'll ensure their victory is short-lived. Charge the main cannon. Adrian noticed the dreadnought's approach on the flickering tactical display. His stomach sank. They're targeting us. Sarah's eyes widened. We don't have shields or weapons. We're sitting ducks. Adrian took a deep breath, his mind racing. He turned to the bridge crew. Prepare for evacuation. Get to the escape pods. What about you, sir? Sarah asked. Adrian shook his head. Someone has to stay behind and buy us time. The crew protested, but Adrian's stern gaze silenced them. That's an order. As the Zorethian dreadnought powered its main cannon, the Shadow Viper arrived at the Iron Resolve. The rescue team quickly boarded the crippled ship, moving with precision to locate and evacuate the crew. Adrian remained on the bridge, watching the dreadnought's weapon charge. He knew the odds were slim, but he wasn't about to let his crew die. Suddenly, the comms crackled. Alina's voice cut through the static. Adrian, you stubborn idiot. You're not going down with that ship. Adrian smiled faintly. Nice to hear from you, Alina. Got any bright ideas? Alina's tone was sharp. We're sending reinforcements. Hold your position. In the chaos of the battlefield, a Shadow Fleet battleship, the Eclipse Hammer, broke through the debris field. Its massive guns swiveled toward the Zorethian dreadnought, firing a devastating salvo. The dreadnought shuddered under the impact, its cannon's energy dissipating as its systems were overwhelmed. The Iron Resolve rocked from the shockwaves, but Adrian allowed himself a small smile. Right on time, he muttered. With the Zorethian fleet in retreat, the rescue team evacuated the last of the Iron Resolve's crew. Adrian was the last to leave, pausing for a moment to look around the bridge. This ship had carried them through impossible odds, and now it would become part of history. He stepped into the rescue shuttle just as the Iron Resolve began to buckle. Moments later, the shuttle cleared the debris field, and the battered warship exploded in a blaze of light, taking the surrounding Zorethian wreckage with it. Back on the Shadow Dagger, the crew of the Iron Resolve was greeted with cheers and applause. Adrian stepped off the shuttle, his expression weary but resolute. Alina was waiting for him, her arms crossed. You never make it easy, do you? She said. Adrian smirked. Wouldn't be fun if it was. Adrian smirked. Wouldn't be fun if it was. Victory against all odds. The Zorethian fleet was in full retreat, their ships scattering into the black void like panicked animals. What had started as an overwhelming invasion had turned into a desperate fight for survival. The once mighty armada was now a shadow of its former self, crippled by the destruction of their flagship and the chaos wrought by humanity's unrelenting resistance. On the bridge of the Shadow Dagger, Admiral Elena Vasquez stood tall, her sharp gaze fixed on the tactical display. The remnants of the Zorethian fleet were being pursued by her warships, but she knew better than to celebrate just yet. "Elena," Adrian Cole said, stepping up beside her. His uniform was still singed from the Iron Resolve's destruction, but his eyes burned with determination. "We've got them on the run. Let's make sure they don't come back." Elena nodded. "Agreed, but we can't just chase them off. We need to send a message." Adrian smirked. "Then let's give them something they'll never forget." The Zorethians' primary retreat path led them to a nearby asteroid field, a dense labyrinth of rocks that offered some semblance of cover. Commander Vosric, now leading what remained of their forces, was a calculating strategist. He saw the field as their best chance to regroup and escape. "Order all remaining ships into the field," Vosric commanded. "We'll lose them in the debris. Humans lack the precision to follow." But Vosric underestimated humanity's ingenuity. The Shadow Fleet regrouped outside the asteroid field, their sleek vessels cutting through the void with predatory grace. Admiral Vasquez addressed her captains via the fleet-wide comm. "Listen up. The Zorethians think they can hide in that field. They're wrong. We've got tracking systems they've never seen, and we're going to flush them out. Divide into hunter-killer groups. No ship gets left behind." Adrian added, "And make it clear, this isn't just a retreat, it's a reckoning." As the human ships entered the asteroid field, the environment shifted dramatically. Massive chunks of rock drifted through space, some colliding in silent explosions of dust and debris. The Zorethians tried to use the field to their advantage, ambushing the humans from the shadows. But humanity had learned to adapt. The Shadow Viper, leading one of the hunter-killer groups, employed its advanced stealth technology to outmaneuver the Zorethians. Using heat signature tracking, the humans pinpointed enemy ships hiding among the rocks. One by one, the Zorethians were hunted down, their ships disabled or destroyed with precision strikes. On the bridge of his dreadnought, Commander Vosric watched the battle unfold with growing frustration. His plans were unraveling, his forces dwindling. "How do they keep finding us?" he snarled. "Our cloaking systems are active. They shouldn't even know we're here." A subordinate hesitated before replying. "Commander, their technology, it surpasses our expectations. Their tactics are adaptive." Vosric slammed his clawed hand on the console. "Enough excuses. Prepare the ship for a final stand. If we are to fall, we will take as many of them with us as possible." Meanwhile, Adrian and Elena coordinated the final stages of the hunt. The humans' superior tactics and teamwork had turned the asteroid field into a trap for the Zorethians. "Adrian," Elena said, her voice steady, "we've isolated their command ship, Vosric's dreadnought. If we take it out, the rest will crumble." Adrian grinned. "Then let's end this." The Shadow Fleet converged on the dreadnought, their ships moving with precision. Vosric's vessel unleashed a torrent of plasma fire, trying to hold them at bay. But the humans were relentless. "Target their weapons systems," Elena ordered. "Disable them, but leave the ship intact. I want Vosric alive." The dreadnought shook violently as the humans' coordinated assault overwhelmed its defenses. On the bridge, Vosric realized the truth. The humans were toying with him. His ship was dead in the water, his weapons silenced. For the first time, fear gripped his chest. They're not like we thought," Vosric muttered, his voice hollow. "They're worse." Adrian and Elena boarded the disabled dreadnought with a small strike team, their boots echoing through the silent halls. They found Vosric in the command center, his once imposing form slumped in defeat. "Commander Vosric," Adrian said, his voice cold, "your fleet is gone. Your empire is broken. Surrender. Vosric glared at him, baring his fangs. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming. Elena stepped forward, her voice like steel. Maybe not, but we'll be ready. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Vosric hesitated, then lowered his head. I will. Back on the Shadow Dagger, Adrian and Elena watched as the remnants of the Zorathian fleet were allowed to retreat. It wasn't mercy. It was a message. Humanity had proven its strength, and the galaxy would take notice. Elena turned to Adrian. This isn't the end. They'll come back. Maybe not the Zorathians, but someone else. Adrian nodded. Let them come. We'll be ready. As the Shadow Fleet regrouped, cheers erupted across the ships. For the first time, humanity had faced the galaxy's most advanced warriors and emerged victorious. But Adrian knew this victory wasn't just about survival. It was about showing the universe what humanity was capable of. Epilogue. Weeks later, on a distant Zorathian colony, whispers of the battle spread like wildfire. Tales of human resilience, adaptability, and ingenuity reached the ears of those who had once dismissed Earth as insignificant. For the first time, fear gripped the galaxy's ruling powers, and far beyond the edge of known space, an unknown force watched with interest. The humans were no longer a backwater species. They were a threat and a challenge.